Emancipation Proclamation, written and issued by President Abraham Lincoln, is an important document that ultimately led to the freedom of African Americans from the bondage of slavery. Many present-day people believe that once the Emancipation Proclamation was issued and took effect, the law required all slaves to be set free. However, just as the Declaration of Independence did not immediately free the American colonies from British rule, the Emancipation Proclamation did not immediately free all American slaves from bondage. Understanding African Americans' path to freedom and the role that the Emancipation Proclamation played requires a little bit of knowledge about Abraham Lincoln and the context in which the Emancipation Proclamation was written and issued. Abraham Lincoln apparently had a personal moral issue with slavery and spoke about it publicly. In his famous speech in Peoria, Illinois in 1854, he stated, quote, "If the Negro is a man, and men are created equal, there can be no moral right in connection with one man's making a slave of another." End quote. However, Lincoln did not believe that the United States Constitution gave the federal government the power to abolish it in the states where it already existed, only to prevent its establishment in the new Western territories that would eventually become states. In his first inaugural address in early 1861, he declared that he had no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with slavery in the states where it exists. At the outset of the Civil War, Lincoln insisted that the Civil War was not about freeing enslaved people in the South, but about preserving the Union. 4 border slave states, Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, remained on the Union side. Lincoln did not threaten their right to keep slaves at this time. Many in the North also opposed abolition. However, as soon as the Civil War began, hundreds of enslaved men, women, and children began fleeing to the Union-controlled areas in the South, such as Fortress Monroe in Virginia, where General Benjamin F. Butler had declared them contraband of war. This defied the fugitive slave law mandating their return to their owners. Abolitionists argued that freeing enslaved people in the South would help the Union win the war, because enslaved labor was vital to the Confederate war effort. In 1862, with little success, Lincoln tried to get the border states to agree to the gradual emancipation of their slaves. His proposal included compensation to enslavers. When abolitionists criticized him for not coming out with a stronger emancipation policy, Lincoln replied that he valued saving the Union over all else. Abraham Lincoln wrote, quote, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all of the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that." End quote. During the Civil War, the Confederate Army used their slaves in the war effort. The Confederate Army used slaves to build trenches, build fortifications, as teamsters, cooks, and hospital attendants. In all of those ways, the slaves were ultimately helping the Confederate cause and working against their own freedom. In July of 1862, Congress passed 2 important pieces of legislation that gave President Lincoln the tools that he needed to make a move toward freeing slaves using his power as Commander-in-Chief. The first was the Militia Act of 1862 that gave President Lincoln the authority to employ persons of African descent in any military capacity that he saw fit. The second important piece was the Second Confiscation Act. In Section 6 of the Second Confiscation Act, Congress gave the President the authority to confiscate all property in the states in rebellion. This included slaves. On September 22, 1862, President Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. The preliminary Emancipation Proclamation warned the states in rebellion that if they did not lay down their arms and return to the Union in the next 100 days, he was going to declare free their slaves on January 1st, 1863. It is important to note at this time that the slaves who lived in the 4 border slave states of Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri that remained on the Union side would not have been set free according to the Emancipation Proclamation. Also, if the states that were in rebellion had indeed laid down their arms and returned to the Union within the 100-day time span, the Confederate states would have been able to keep their slaves too. And finally, for any slave to have been freed, the Union would still have the task of defeating the Confederate States if the Confederate States did not surrender by the January 1st, 1863 deadline. As of January 1st, 1863, the Confederate States had not surrendered and returned to the Union. On that day, President Lincoln issued the final Emancipation Proclamation as, quote, a fit and necessary war measure for suppressing said rebellion, end quote. Within that fit and necessary measure, President Lincoln declared forever free all persons held as slaves in the 10 states that were at war with the United States. General Ulysses S. Grant would say that the Emancipation Proclamation added a powerful ally to the Union war effort. As such, January 1863, the quote, regional conflict between the states, as it had previously been defined, became a war of emancipation. From that point, hundreds and thousands of men, women, and children of African descent joined the Union war effort, seeking the gift of liberty. Full freedom and citizenship for all African Americans became the law with the passing of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments of the Constitution. It would take another 90 years for civil rights for African Americans to become the law in the United States. If you like this video, click the like button below. Click the subscribe button to be notified of any new History Made Easy videos.